He didn't slip away in a hospital room under fluorescent glare. He didn't vanish behind a curtain of scandal. He died where he had always wanted to live, under the vast Utah sky, at home in Sundance, quietly, at 89. And that is the first truth. The shock isn't in how he died. It's in how fully he lived, and how carefully he kept the heaviest parts of that life hidden from the lights. Robert Redford. A face that once defined a generation. A voice that could make a whisper sound like a promise. For 6 decades, he stood in front of us like a mountain. Handsome, unshakable, inevitable. We thought we knew the man on the poster. We didn't know the pilgrim walking the long road home. In the end, he left this world the way he moved through it at his best. Calmly, deliberately, surrounded by the land that shaped him and the people who loved him. The official line was simple: he passed away at home, in the mountains he fought to protect. But look closer. That simplicity is the point. He had spent a lifetime untangling himself from noise. Hollywood noise, tabloid noise, the kind of noise that confuses fame with truth. In death as in life, he chose quiet. The story people want is always the same: a fall from grace, a secret, a scandal hiding in plain sight. That is not this story. The deeper, harder truth is that Redford's final days were not a cliff, they were a landing. He reached them after a long descent from the summit, fewer steps, softer voice, the body obeying time. The man who once ran with outlaws on screen now watched light move across the canyons. He wasn't hiding. He was listening, to wind, to water, to silence, to the last things that matter. And if you're still looking for what really happened, start with what shaped him. Before the fame, before the myth, came the first wound, a childhood brush with polio. It didn't paralyze him. It did something else. It interrupted his body, slowed him down, and taught him what fear feels like when it lives in your own skin. He got better. He moved on. But fear leaves a trace. Later, he called the polio vaccine's arrival earth-shattering. Imagine carrying that memory, a world before a cure, and you begin to understand why he treasured second chances. Then came the love story that looked unbreakable until it wasn't. He married young. Shared hunger, shared hope, borrowed furniture, promises made in dim apartments. And then the unthinkable, their first son, Scott, gone in infancy. There is no neat sentence for that. Parents aren't built to outlive a child. Grief doesn't heal so much as it settles, like sediment at the bottom of a glass. Years later another blow would follow. Jamie, his son with the wide, generous heart, the filmmaker who turned struggle into service, lost to cancer of the bile ducts at 58. 2 sons, taken decades apart, and a father left carrying the quiet weight that only other grieving parents can hear in a room. This, more than anything, is the secret history that ran beneath the smile. He kept working. He did what the broken often do, he built. On stages and sound stages. On mountain slopes and back roads. He took the thing that threatened to turn him into a statue, his beauty, and fought it until it cracked. Critics called him a golden boy. He answered by chasing roles that asked for conscience. He answered by stepping behind the camera, not to admire himself, but to disappear into story. When ordinary people won him the Oscar for directing, it sounded like triumph. It also sounded like escape, a way out of the cage of his face. And then he built the place that would define his second life, Sundance. Not just a festival, but a refuge. A door for other people's voices. He had been underestimated for his looks. He spent the rest of his years overestimating everyone else on purpose, believing in artists before the world did. That was his rebellion. Not noise. Not gossip. Faith. He put his name on the gate and then used that name to let everyone else in. He guarded the land with the same stubbornness. Utah wasn't a retreat from Hollywood. It was a return to himself. Pines. Snowmelt. The shadow of a hawk moving across rock. He fought for rivers and against smokestacks. He raised money for stories and raised hell for the earth. And when he got older, he did something rarer than another award. He made room for grace. He married again, later this time, to an artist who spoke in water and light. With Sibylle Saggers he found a language that didn't need applause, a shared project, the way of the rain, a kind of prayer for the planet. In that partnership you can see the man he wanted to be when the microphones were off, humble, steady, awake. So what were his tragic final days? They were the last pages of a long book written in opposites. Applause and silence. Movie palaces and hospital rooms. The public myth and the private ache. In those days the circle closed, daughters near, grandchildren closer, the wife he trusted beside him, the land outside his windows doing what land does, enduring. In the coverage you'll read words like peacefully, at home, surrounded. Believe them. Those are not press office decorations. They are a veteran's stripes earned over a lifetime of choosing what matters and leaving the rest behind. And still, there's a sorrow here that numbers can't hold. Not the sorrow of death. The sorrow of distance, hours from him. We mistook the poster for the person. We confused charisma with comfort. We thought icons can carry everything. They can't. Redford learned that earlier than most. He lost friends too, friends whose names sounded like institutions. Natalie Wood gone too soon. Paul Newman, the brother he chose, taken by illness. When Newman died, Redford said there was a hole in his life. No metaphor. A hole. If you want the hidden truth, listen there. This was a man who could make a nation laugh on Friday night and then go home to the echo of someone's missing chair. By the time the end approached, he had already done the hardest work a person can do. He had made peace with contradiction. He didn't pretend grief was a teacher. He let it be grief. And he kept moving anyway, one film, one trail, one conversation at a time. That's why the industry's tributes sound the way they do this week. Not flashy, not performative. Grateful. They know what we now remember. That he changed the career of everyone who came to Sundance with a little movie and left with a future. That he gave us permission to tell small stories that mean everything. That he showed, without speeches, how to stand tall without stepping on anyone. If you need an answer about cause, take the human one. Time. A body used well and worn honestly. A life that found its way from noise back to nature. The shock is only this: legends are mortal. The truth is kinder than the headline. He didn't fall. He arrived. Close your eyes and you can still hear him. That unhurried cadence. That measured breath that never chased applause, only meaning. He didn't force words. He let them arrive, like light crossing a room at dawn. He was never hurrying you. He was inviting you to lean in. To consider. To care. To sit with a thought long enough for it to change you. Maybe that's why the silence feels so loud now, because the spaces between his words once held so much. On camera, on stage, in those environmental appeals, in those indie film introductions where new voices first trembled with hope, he wasn't performing a part. He was offering a way of being. A way of paying attention to fragile things. Trust, land, love, story. He knew how easily they fracture. He knew how sacred it is when they hold. Think of the boy who lay still, waiting for his body to come back, counting breaths as if each one were a promise he refused to break. Think of the young husband painting a nursery in the soft glow of evening, stepping back to admire a future in pale colors, and then standing in a doorway that suddenly felt like a cliff when the room went quiet. Think of the father in a hospital chair, memorizing the weight of his son's hand, tracing every line, every freckle, every pulse, because love is detail and grief remembers detail forever. Think of the star who had everything the posters could print, and still decided it wasn't enough to be admired. He wanted to be useful. He turned fame into stewardship. He turned attention into shelter. He transformed a spotlight into a doorway and waved others through. And then think of the steward who let himself become small again in the presence of mountains, the man who learned to listen to trees like elders and treat rivers as scriptures. These are the chapters you don't see in the montage, because they require patience, and patience is not television. But these are the scenes that give the famous ones their weight. They're the truth sewn under the costume. In his last seasons he drifted further from the noise on purpose. Not out of bitterness, out of wisdom. He had spent a lifetime proving that loud isn't the same as important. So the interviews grew fewer. The days grew longer. Mornings began with light on snow and coffee that steam-wrote messages into cold air. Afternoons ended with wind carving its signature along the ridge. If you've ever visited Sundance, you know that feeling. The way the sky resets your breathing and the pines tutor you in how to stand. You speak softer without trying. You move slower without deciding. That valley becomes a kind of theater where the story is weather and the soundtrack is water. That was the stage where he took his final bow. Not a curtain drop. A sunset. Not an ovation. The hush that follows a good story, the hush that says we were changed. He used to say the land doesn't clap, but it remembers. Trails remember footsteps. Stones remember heat. Rivers remember every hand that tried to bend them and every hand that blessed them. He wanted to be remembered like that, not as noise, but as shape, as care. And as the circle tightened, fewer flights, more family dinners, work that felt like craft rather than war, he gave himself permission to be simple again. He laughed the way people laugh when they have nothing to prove. He saved his sharpness for the things that mattered: a young filmmaker's first cut, a field report on a watershed under threat, a note in the margin of a script that could be better if someone dared to be braver. So what do we do with a legend when the legend is gone? We do what he did. We trade spectacle for substance. We practice the discipline of quiet. We remember that fame is small and love is large, that trending is quick and truth is patient. We tell the truth even when it's simple. Especially when it's simple. A great man died at home. He left work unfinished because work worth doing is never finished. He left a world of artists better for his stubborn faith that they belonged. He left a wife who made the dark years lighter, who turned weather into art and art into prayer. He left children and grandchildren who never had to guess at the size of his love, they carried it into rooms like a lamp. We inherit more than memories. We inherit assignments. To protect what he protected. To find the young voice in the back row and walk it to the mic. To keep a space open at the table for the story that almost didn't make it. To hold our convictions without turning them into weapons. To argue with grace. To practice gratitude out loud. To leave places better than we found them. And to keep a little piece of ourselves untouchable by approval, because that piece is where courage lives. And if you still want the shocking truth behind his death, here it is. The shock is that there was no mask to rip away. No hidden villain skulking in the third act. No last-minute twist designed to sell another headline. There was only a man who carried more than we ever saw and chose, at the end, exactly the life he had been building in plain sight. Art, land, family, quiet. That's not a scandal. That's a standard. It asks something of us. It asks us to live in ways our future selves will recognize with pride. This is celebrity gossip, but tonight we're choosing reverence over rumor. If this tribute touched you, if you felt the ache of what we've lost and the warmth of what he gave, let it show. Like this video to keep his light in the feed. Subscribe for more stories told with care, not chaos. And in the comments, tell us the Robert Redford moment that lives in you. A line, a look, a lesson, a landscape he taught you to see. Share this with someone who needs its quiet. The curtain has fallen. The echo remains.